Three.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. My name's Jacqueline O'Monier. I'm one of the Education and Training Officers at Under One Roof. I'm joined here today by my colleague Rebecca Grant, our Comms Officer, who's going to be helping me host this webinar. And we're delighted to be here with our colleagues from Dundee City Council today. We've got Graham and Diane on the call today. They are going to join us for the Q&A at the end of the presentation to answer any questions that you guys in the audience may have. We're going to be here for about an hour today. The format is going to be a PowerPoint presentation that I will go through with you all. Then once that's complete, we'll come back into this area for the Q&A. You'll see either at the top of your screen or at the side of your screen, depending on what type of device that you're doing, that there's some boxes. We've got a chat box, which is where Rebecca will post links to web pages from our website Under One Roof and any other relevant web pages that will be useful for you to have a look at in your own time. We've also got the Q&A box, which is where we would ask you to put your questions in. So as we go through the webinar, if anything comes to mind that you want to ask a question about, please just pop it in the Q&A box, and Rebecca will get to that when we have our Q&A session at the end. We are recording today's session, so don't worry too much about frantically trying to take down notes and all the kind of the talking points. You will get a copy of the recording and the slide deck sent out to you after the event, usually within 24 hours, so that you can refer back to things in your own time. And then obviously you can follow up with myself if you have any specific questions once you've looked over everything. Rebecca and I are remote today, so there's no chance of any fire alarms or anything like that. So I think that we will just get started with the presentation. So let me just do a bit of technical jiggery pokery and share my screen here, and we will take you through this. Okay, so if you are not familiar with who we are at Under One Roof, or perhaps you've maybe heard of us, but you're just not 100% sure what we actually do, or you need a refresher, we are the only charity in Scotland that provides free impartial information on repairs, maintenance and retrofit for tenement flat owner-occupiers, landlords and housing professionals in Scotland. We're funded by the Scottish Government and 28 out of the 32 local authorities across Scotland, of which Dundee City is one, and we're hugely grateful for that. And we regularly work with anybody who has an interest in a tenement flat. When we talk about tenement flats at Under One Roof, we're not just talking about our traditional red and blonde sandstone buildings. We're talking about tenements per the legal definition in the 2004 Act, which states that any property that's been split into two or more horizontally for residential accommodation is classed as being a tenement. So if you own a flat that's above a shop, it's an ex-local authority. For in a block, it's a low-rise building, a high-rise, or a modern development, or a converted townhouse or villa. Chances are that is a tenement, and we are here to help you with anything that's going on within that property. So if you're not familiar with our website, we would encourage you to go on and have a look in your own time, and have a read of the information that we've got there, and just get a feel for who we are and how we can help you. But the purpose of our event today is to talk about damp and mould. The Scottish Government is intending to introduce a version of AWAB's law into Scotland this year. So if you're not already aware of this, it's legislation that's in place in England at the moment, and it came into place following the death of a toddler who was called AWAB back in 2020. He lived with his family in a social housing property in England that had severe problems with damp and mould that caused him to develop severe health issues that ultimately led to the loss of his life. So this legislation has been put into place in England to prevent any further loss of life through damp and mould being present in properties. In Scotland, we're slightly different for landlords and for social housing providers, in that we've got two kind of legislative and regulatory frameworks that the private sector and the social sector work within. But this new legislation is just a kind of further belts and braces on that, so that we can try and eradicate damp and mould as much as possible in our housing stock. So before we get started to talk about the legislative proposals as they currently sit with Parliament, I'm just going to run you through a few things with regards to damp and mould. I apologise in advance to anybody who is sitting with their lunch in front of them or a cup of tea and a biscuit, because some of the photographs are not the best, but we will we'll whiz through that as best we can. So you generally tend to find that there's two types of damp that you can have in a property. There's either rising damp or penetrating damp. Rising damp, for those that don't know, is the upward movement of moisture from the ground into the lower section of a building's walls. So we would typically expect to see porous bricks and mortar that draw up groundwater, and that groundwater can potentially contain salt, and you can get salt contamination marks on walls and in a property after the water evaporates, and it'll leave crystallized marks on the walls. It may be that you have a damp-proof course in the basement or the ground floor of your building that's become defective, that's allowed water in, that's caused rising damp, or perhaps you don't have a damp-proof course, and that's one of the remedial actions that's recommended to you by a professional to install that to try and mitigate any further rising damp and the return of that in your property. So where we have rising damp, we would expect to see things like watermarks on the lower sections of walls internally and externally. We can see from the top right image what those salt crystallization marks look like. They're quite different to kind of black or green damp and mould that's on walls. It's quite specific and bubbly. So if you're here today and you're thinking, I've got something similar in my flat, or I've noticed this in the in the common stair area of our building, or externally, and I'm a bit concerned about it, but I don't know what it is, chances are it could well be rising damp. Our next type is penetrating damp, which is essentially when water enters a property from the outside. Your most common causes of penetrating damp are fabric issues with a building. So we talk about things like roof issues. It could be slipped slates. It could be missing slates or tiles. It could be a flat roof that's come to the end of its life. Or it could be that you've got gutter issues. Perhaps you've got a little bit of green foliage growing out your gutter. Perhaps you've got a full tree. It could just be choked up with leaves that's preventing water from draining along the gutters, down the drain pipe, out through the rainwater goods. It may well be that you've got cracked masonry, so the pointing between the bricks on the front of your building could have cracked and fallen out, and that's allowing water to get through, particularly when we've got the driving rain and wind that's typical to Scotland. It might well be that you've got issues with the external window and door surrounds that's causing water to penetrate through, and you could have blocked drain pipes or cracks and leaks in your drain pipes that's allowing water to penetrate through the fabric of the building and cause penetrating damp. So your classic examples that would alert you to a potential fabric issue that could cause penetrating damp in a building would be things like you can see where there's moss growth and foliage growth from gutters, where you can see on the top left that you have got wet stonework. The bottom left, where you can see that the downpipe is rusted and it's not in great condition at all. You can see where it's wet on the stonework as well. You can see the tree growing out the gutter on the or the plant growing out the gutter on the top right. Bottom right, you can see some foliage growth out the gutters, and where you've got green moss down the front of the building, indicating that there are issues. Where we have damp, we're pretty much always going to have mold. Mold's a type of fungus that grows on surfaces and damp and humid conditions even. It loves a food source. So anything that's damp, anything that's humid is just rampant for mold to grow and just keep on going. Our main causes of mold growth and properties is where we've got water ingress from leaking roofs, plumbing leaks, where we've got poor ventilation and properties, where, you know, there's no moisture, escape of moisture in the property, that's allowing the humidity to increase, which is a great conditions for mold to grow. When you've got condensation, so if you have got, you know, your typically condensation, if you think about at night when you're sleeping, your breath is warm. We're all breathing at night. You wake up in the morning, and that hot air has hit the cold window, and you open the curtains, roll up the blinds in the morning, whatever it may be, and you've got condensation all over your window. The majority of us would be like, all right, okay, let's get a towel or a cloth or something and wipe that off, clean it up. A lot of people don't do that. Tenants and properties may not always do that, and if that's left and it's not wiped off, it can become mouldy. And obviously rising or penetrating damp is going to cause mold growth as well. So things that we would expect to see with molding properties, top left and bottom right is your classic condensation on the window, and what happens when you don't clean that off, where it starts to get moldy around the window itself and the sill and on the walls. Top right, we can see that there's black mold growth on a ceiling, and in the bottom left, we can see that there's a fungal mushroom growth as well as black mold. All of these things are hugely harmful to a person's health, but particularly if you've got underlying health conditions, especially respiratory issues. Nobody wants to live in a property that has this type of black mold, and definitely not where you've got that fungal growth. In my previous life, before I was at Under One Roof, I was a letting agent for the best part of 20 years, and I have had properties that have developed this kind of fungal growth due to leaks from above. It's hugely distressing. They fall off, and then they just grow back, and it needs a lot of a lot of work and a lot of specialized treatment to eradicate it. So we don't want to be in situations where this is what's happening within our properties, and we want to try and eradicate this as much as possible. So, as a landlord here today, why is it important for you to maintain and look after the building where your rental property or properties are? Well, at Under One Roof, we want you to know what your responsibilities are as an owner, as a landlord. It's not just that you bought your property to rent out, you also bought a share of the common areas of the building that you're responsible for with the co-owners. A lot of the issues connected to damp and mould are due to fabric issues as opposed to lifestyle issues, but I do fully appreciate that lifestyle issues contribute to mould growth in a property. But where we're talking about fabric issues, those responsibilities lie with the owners of the properties within a building, within a tenement building, to carry out repairs and maintenance. You need to know what the condition of the building is where you have a rental property or properties. You need to engage with the other owners in the building. It's not the days of being an anonymous landlord, or perhaps you're here and you're thinking, I'm the only one that ever does anything in our building. Those days are all gone. It has to be a move towards a collaborative approach where all of the owners engage with each other, that they understand, no one understands what their legal obligations are, what can happen if they fail to comply with their legal obligations, and how work can be enforced. We want to move owners and landlords away from a constant cycle of reactive repairs and high unexpected bills. We want there to be a more planned approach to the maintenance and upkeep of the tenement buildings. We want owners to have adequate insurance. So as a landlord, you should have a building insurance policy for your property that also covers your share of the common areas. It might be that you're here today and your property or your building, sorry, has a property factor and they organise insurance on a block or common basis for all of the owners that each owner pays a share towards. It might be that you're here today and you think we've got no property factor. I know I've got insurance, but I don't know about everybody else in the building. Then that's where we can start to have a think about that from today onwards about the type of insurance that we have. Is it an individual policy? Is it a common or a block policy? Do you know if all the other owners in the building have an insurance policy? You can ask them for that information. There's it's covered within the 2004 Tenement Scotland Act that you can ask people to produce insurance. But the reason that I'm talking about insurance today is because where you have incidents with fire, floods, catastrophic, other catastrophic incidents, or where there's huge damage to a building, you need to have a building insurance policy there, and everybody has to have one at an adequate level, so that there's no financial black hole where people are underinsured or have no insurance when you need to reinstate a building. So please check your insurance details. And as I say, the days of not engaging or struggling to get other owners to engage with you are on the wane now. We need to have regular communication with owners. I'm not expecting people to become friends. I'm not expecting everybody to get together on a weekly basis. But what I am expecting, or what I would like to see, is that owners are in some type of regular communication with each other, whether that's on a monthly, quarterly, or biannual basis, where you're getting together to have a chat about what's going on with the building and making decisions about work that's required, or notifying each other of when there's an issue within your property that, for example, with damp and mould, that could potentially be caused by a fabric defect or something else going on in the building that needs to be dealt with. So, as I said, the purpose of our event today is to talk about the Scottish Government extending the principles of AWAB's law into the private rented sector in Scotland. The proposal, as it's sitting with the Scottish Government at the moment, is called the Investigation and Commencement of Repair Scotland Regulations 2026, with a target commencement date of the 6th of October, so not too far away. You can go online and you can have a look at these proposed regulations in your own time, and I'm sure Rebecca can put a link in the chat to the webpage specifically on this, so that you can read that in full detail in your own time to see what it is that they're putting together. And I'm going to run through what the proposals are stating right now. So why are we doing all of this, or why is the Scottish Government doing all of this? Well, it's part of the wider effort to raise standards in our housing sector in Scotland. The aims and objectives of this are to ensure that tenants have a warm, safe and secure home free from disrepair, that landlords will have a legal obligation to investigate and resolve complaints about damp and mould, that it will reduce instances of long-term exposure to damp and mould, and try and mitigate any other health issues that could arise from that. And the first tier tribunal at the Housing and Property Chamber are likely to be tasked with dealing with the complaints and reports of non-compliance for people who are not meeting the obligations under this proposed legislation. This was first introduced as part of the Housing Scotland Act 2025 that gained royal assent in November last year. Paragraph 47 of that Act talks about damp and mould and the Scottish Minister's ability to give further instruction under the tolerable standard for landlords to comply and start to investigate and resolve issues about damp and mould in a more proactive fashion than may be happening at the moment. So we've known about it for a wee while. Originally, when they talked about this, they talked about it being implemented from March this year, but the Cabinet Secretary for Housing introduced a secondary legislation to Parliament back in January. It was debated a couple of weeks ago in February, and we're still waiting to hear how they are going to take this forward, and if they can meet the target commencement date of the 6th of October. But for the purposes of this, we want to educate owners and landlords and housing professionals as much as possible on what these proposals are, so that we can start to prepare you for what's coming, so that you can start to have a think about what your approach to this is going to be. So the proposals, as they are currently sitting with Parliament, are that landlords will have strict timeframes to comply with in the repairs process for damp and mould issues. So they are saying that landlords will have 10 working days to investigate damp and mould claims. So when your tenant notifies you, you've got 10 working days to get round to the property to have a look and figure out what's going on. After that 10 days is complete, you've got 3 working days to write to the tenant after the initial investigation with a summary of what you found and of what work, if any, need to take place. If work needs to be carried out to eradicate the issue, then you've got 5 working days to arrange work using a competent professional. Landlords will have to pay compensation up to the value of £100 at proposal stage right now, where they've failed to carry out investigations within 10 working days, or where an appointed contractor has failed to carry out work within the 5 working days. So that is potentially what we are looking at coming into play. So we need to have a think about how we're going to be able to meet these timescales, and what we need to do. Do we know any kind of damp and preservation companies that are operating in the local area? Are we, have we got a good enough relationship with our tenants? Are we in regular contact with them? If you're using a letting agent, how are they geared up to help you with this and meet your compliance with this? So there's a lot to think about. Lots of people, as they're kind of thinking about the this new legislation and the proposals, have got caught up on the point of what it means to be substantially free from damp and mould, and people are looking for an exact definition of that. If we think on the 2006 version of the Housing Scotland Act, there's guidance notes in there for professionals about being substantially, and under the tolerable standard, about being substantially free from damp and mould, and that it's the qualification for that is if it's more than 10% of a room. We would always recommend that where you do get a complaint about damp and mould, that there's more of a holistic approach that's taken to it, where you're thinking about what kind of damp is it that's in this property. Is it penetrating damp? Is it rising damp? Both of those, as we've already covered, speaking towards that there's a potential issue with the fabric of the building, that won't just be potentially your sole responsibility to repair, and you'll need to deal with the other owners in the building. Or is it condensation? Is that related to the tenant's lifestyle and their use of the property? But it's important that you know the cause of the damp so that you can determine the severity of it, and what remediation work is going to be required. What about when you've got mould? Is it just surface mould, that's maybe sitting on a bath seal or something like that? Or is it more deeply embedded? Have you got that fungal growth? Is the wall deteriorating as a result of the black mould that's there? What's the situation there? Some molds are more hazardous than others. So we're not expecting everybody to suddenly turn into a damp and mould expert overnight. But to the naked eye, it's generally quite obvious. Okay, I need to actually remove the silicone seal and replace it because it's come to the end of its life cycle, or there's just a tiny wee bit of mold there from, I don't know, a lack of ventilation in a certain area that I could clean off with hot water and bleach and a mold and mildew remover spray, or oh my goodness, the entire ceiling or the entire wall is covered in this, or I've moved the wardrobe and behind it, yikes, the wall is in a state. I'm going to need to get professional help here. You see where I'm going with it and the things that you need to consider. You also need to consider the occupants that you've got in the property. So if you've got any tenants that are classed as being vulnerable, so that could be that's a family living there, they've got children. It could be it's an elderly person or people that are in the property. It could be that that the tenant has got respiratory issues. And you need to consider whether that person or those people's health could be more significantly impacted by even small amounts of damp and mold being present in a property. You need to think about the location of the damp and mold. Is it in a bedroom or a living area, a high traffic area, somewhere where people spend a lot of time that would be of greater concern than if it was just a little bit of mold that was inside a storage cupboard that they kept the Christmas tree in that nobody really used. Doesn't necessarily mean you don't have to do anything if it's in a less frequently used space. But in order for you to kind of qualify eradicating this and the action that you're going to have to take, if it's in a room or a space that's not used very often compared to a bedroom and it's a one-bedroom flat, then yeah, you're going to have to spring into action a little bit quicker. We would recommend that you consult a qualified surveyor or a damp and preservation specialist, especially if it's a kind of borderline situation where you're not sure, okay, I don't know if I could clean this, it'll come off, I'll not need to go back to it, everything, it'll be fine. Or I've got, yikes, I've got no idea where this is coming from. This is significant. I didn't realize it was as bad as this. We are going to need to get a professional to look at this, to give us a professional opinion on the root cause and what remediation work is required, and what people or the occupants or myself as a landlord are going to have to do on a longer term basis to prevent this from coming back. So what can you do now as a landlord? First things first, you need to get out to your property and you need to visit it. Okay. This proposed legislation will sit under the repairing standard legislation. So you need to make sure that your property complies with the repairing and the tolerable standards. It's something that you should be doing anyway. You've got a legal obligation to comply with the repairing standard. So if it's been a while since you've been out to your property or your properties, you don't really know what's happening, you've lost the thread, you think there might be an issue with damp and mold in one of them, or maybe a few of them, or maybe you're thinking, Jings, I've not thought about the repairing standard for ages, I've got no idea if I even comply with that. Get out and have a look at it. Make an assessment, have a look on the Scottish Government's website as well as our own website. Rebecca will post links to the pages on the repairing and the tolerable standards, so you know exactly what to look for when you go around. If you, in the interim, if you receive a complaint from your tenant about damp and mold in their property, or maybe you've got something that's sitting in your inbox at the moment, or you're concerned that something could happen, first thing to do is to arrange a visit. Make sure you cross-reference on your private residential tenancy agreement, the PRT, so that you're using the right communication methods and given the correct amount of notice to arrange a visit with your tenant. Remember, you might be sitting here thinking, Jacqueline, that's all fine and well, but my tenant is super difficult about access and I can never really get in. Remember, under the PRT, we've got authorised purposes for access, which is to carry out repairs, to carry out inspections, and to carry out valuations in accordance with the repairing standard. So if you find that your tenant has been difficult, they're withholding or refusing access, you have to make an application to the first tier tribunal for withholding access to get a ruling that you can access your property. When you go round, so say somebody calls you up or they email you to say we've got damp and black mold in the flat, we're not sure what to do, you're going to arrange a visit. You're going to go around there, you're going to have a wee look, you're going to think about, right, who's living in this property, where is this issue about, what room is it in? Is it a wee small patch, or is it the whole wall, the whole ceiling? Or does it, look like there's something a bit more sinister going on? Is it something that I could potentially get a bit of hot water and bleach to clean off black mold? Can I use a mold and mildew remover spray, or is this kind of circumstances out with my abilities to deal with? You want to photograph exactly what you find, and you want to keep a separate file for this complaint, so that you can build up a dossier of evidence showing when you were notified about it, the date you went round for a visit, photographs that are date and time stamped, showing what you found at the time of your visit, a note of any work that you carried out to remove mold or to try and help the situation, and then photographs of what it looks like after you've done any kind of removal work, or you arrange a follow-up visit because you want to go back and check things. It's important that you start to think about your record keeping, and how you can evidence, particularly if this complaint went to the first tier tribunal or environmental health got involved, that you can produce a dossier of evidence to show that you've been proactive. If you're working with a letting agent, make sure that you've checked your terms of business agreement with them and their policies and procedures so that you know how they're approaching compliance with the repairing standard, and how they're potentially going to be able to assist you when there are complaints about damp and mould. And always seek professional advice from a specialist contractor if it's something that is way beyond your skills and your knowledge on how to deal with it. You can have a think about your heating system that you have in your property, and make sure that it's been serviced on a regular basis. We want our heating systems to be fully operational and to be working at their optimum. We want tenants to be able to bleed radiators, particularly if they are saying, I put the heating on, this radiator is stone cold, or there's only a wee bit at the top or a wee bit at the bottom that heats up. It might be that you need to give them a key to bleed the radiator with instructions on how to do that. You should make sure your tenants have got copies of safety check certificates and service paperwork. And if you're thinking about changing or upgrading your heating system because you know that is contributing to issues in your property, then you can speak to Home Energy Scotland for advice on that. They've got surveyors that can come out and have a look at your property and make recommendations, and they've got access to grants and funding specifically for landlords. So we often, when we talk about damp and mould, and in this arena, when we think about the narrative of lifestyle issues and the lack of action that tenants are taking, then we want to make sure that often it's talked about, well, we told them to make sure that the property is heated and that the windows are open, which is all fine and well, but if the heating system isn't working correctly or it's not working at all, then we want them to be able to bleed radiators and to get the heating working to its absolute optimum. We also want to check ventilation systems when we go around to do a visit. We need to make sure that all of the windows that we've got in our properties open properly. Fresh air is our best source of natural ventilation. So if we've got traditional sash and case windows, we want to make sure that when we open the top or the bottom sash, the window's weighted correctly and the sash just doesn't drop down on you. We want to make sure that that window ropes are intact, that they're not frayed or split, or that the windows are painted shut. Similarly, for sash and case windows in a kitchen where there's a kitchen sink and worktop in front of it, we want to make sure that the tenant has got a pole that they can hook on and open the window. For more more modern windows where we've got trickle vents on them. We want to make sure that those vents actually open and that they're free from dust and debris. It's amazing how much they fill up with rubbish. So we can clean those out and make sure if they're stuck shut that we can unstick them and open them so that there's a constant flow of fresh air. Extractor fans, mechanical extraction that we've got in our properties, particularly for kitchens and bathrooms. Do they work? Are they properly connected to an external duct and they're not just venting out into a ceiling void with all that hot humid air rather than being vented externally? It might be that the extractor fans are thick with dust. When you take the cover off them, you think, holy moly, what's happened in here? We need to get the hoover up to hoover it out, to clean it. It might be that you're saying, well, I've got all of that in my property, Jacqueline, but the tenants never switch it on. So what am I supposed to do? You might want to consider, particularly where you've got internal kitchens and bathrooms, that you get an electrician to rewire the switch into the light switch. Chances are with internal kitchens and bathrooms, people are going to 99% of the time need to switch the light on. So if the fan's wired into that, when they switch the light on, it'll automatically come on, and that can potentially help you where there's notifiable issues where they're not actually switching the extractors on. So that's something to consider. We also want you to know the condition of your building as we speak about rising and penetrating damp and the issues that cause them with the fabric defects to the building, whether that's at ground level, below ground level, it's at roof level, or it's with the actual, the external walls. We need you to have an idea of what's going on. You might need to check the repair history with a property factor or another owner who's been a bit more proactive in arranging repairs in the building. It might be that you're aware that there's an issue that's affecting your property that's caused damp and significant mold growth, and you're getting absolutely nowhere with the other tenants, with the other owners in the building to organise common repairs. So you might need to speak to environmental health to get support. Again, they would want to see a dossier of evidence to prove what you've done to date, how you've tried to resolve situations, where things, haven't worked out, and what kind of support you're looking for from them, and they'll be able to advise you on how they can help you. It's a good idea. We find, again, when we're talking about tenants' lifestyles, and there's always a big thing in the press whenever you Google anything to do with damp and mold about, oh, well, tenants dry wet wash in the property, they don't open the windows and they don't put the heating on. So we are thinking about how we get our heating systems working to the optimum, using Home Energy Scotland if we need to change or upgrade our heating systems, how we can check the ventilation in our properties and make sure that that's working as effectively as it can be. When it comes to wet washing in the warmer months, if we've got a garden out the back, let's have a look at the title deeds and see who owns that garden if you don't already know. Chances are in a traditional tenement building with a garden, it's going to be the owners of the building that own that back garden in common with each other. But the title deeds are always a good place to start. If you don't have a copy of your title deeds, you can go on to Registers of Scotland and buy a copy. It's normally about £3.60. And if that is a usable space, get a washing line up there if there's not one there already, and let your tenants know that that's available for them to use in the warmer months, so that you're providing an alternative for clothes drying. So what are some of our top tips for flat owners when we talk about anything to do with tenement management and maintenance at under one roof? We want owners to know who each other are. It's no good sitting here saying, yeah, you need to be in contact with people, you need to do X, Y, and Z, you need to engage, you need to get evidence together, you need to be proactive, etc. if you don't know who people are. So first things first, have a think about who do you know in the building Whose contact details have you got? If you've got everybody's contact details, great. Double check that they're all up to date and that's circulated amongst all of the owners. But you might need to start at the bottom rung of the ladder to get in contact with people. Rebecca will post a link to our page on contacting owners so that you can get an idea of where to start, whether it's a rental property or an owner-occupied property, and what to do if it's an empty property. You might want to consider establishing an owners association for your building. An owners association in Scotland at the moment in our kind of regulatory framework exists as just a formal agreement between owners. The Scottish Government are sitting with a proposal from the Scottish Law Commission to make owners associations compulsory in Scotland and to follow what people do in Europe, America, Australia, and other parts of the world. So if you don't have an owners association for your building, you're not sure what that is, you think we could probably do that in our building, it would be useful, or I've got no clue where to start on that. Rebecca will post a link to our resources on owners associations to talk you through that. I've talked about buildings insurance and the importance of having that to meet your legal obligation, but also to make sure that the other owners have insurance as well. We've got page links that Rebecca will post on buildings insurance, and the importance of making sure that your reinstatement valuation on your insurance policy is an up-to-date value. Insurers have got access to price indexes that they can look at, but if you've owned your property for 5 or more years and you can't remember a time at all, if any, that the owner's got a reinstatement valuation survey carried out, you may want to consider employing a building surveyor to do that. Likewise, if you've owned your flat for 5 or more years and you're thinking, I've got zero idea of the condition of this building, Jacqueline, not got a clue, can't tell you the last time I was even at my flat, never mind what's happening with the building. Or you could be like, if somebody contacts me one more time, Jacqueline, and asks me for £250 for a roof repair, I'm going to scream. I don't know what's happening here. Think about getting together and having a chat about having an architect or a building surveyor carry out a building survey. It's not cheap. It's probably going to cost you, I don't know, somewhere between £1,000 to £2,000. But what it will do is give you a building condition report, and it will set out in a kind of traffic light system what you need to deal with urgently and what you need to plan for in the immediate future and what you need to, save for in the next 5 to 10 years. It's a really good document to have to understand the condition of the building and what your repairing obligations are, and try and help you as you look to mitigate issues with damp and mould in your property. In the meantime, it's a good idea to have a look around the common areas of the building. Don't just go in with the blinkers on and go straight up to your flat or think, well, I'm on the ground floor, so I don't know what's happening upstairs. Go and have a look throughout the building. Have a look at the doors, the downpipes, and what's happening in the stairs. It's obvious that there's signs of damp and mould in the common stair area. When you cross the street and look up over at the building, can you see that you've got plant growth out the gutters? What's going on? Have a wee look and try and familiarise yourself. Make sure that you and the co-owners have got a set up so that the gutters can get cleaned out on an annual basis and the roof gets checked over. Have a planned maintenance schedule. It doesn't have to be a fancy Excel spreadsheet and everybody's got a task to do. It can be as simple as just jotting down every week somebody comes to clean the stairs. In the summer months, once a month, somebody comes to cut the grass. Start to put something together. Think about your approach to saving for and paying for repairs. The days of cash and envelopes going through somebody's door or paying into somebody's personal bank account are really starting to go. You can get maintenance bank accounts at a lot of the bank and high street bank and building societies and online providers. So have a think about looking into that and whether you could get one for your building. If you've got a property factor, make sure that you're in contact with them, that you know when they're carrying out site visits and that they're hosting owners meetings to keep you up to date with what's going on. Remember, the factor doesn't have the they don't have the automatic authorization to go ahead with repair work to the building, and they don't have a magic pot of money to pay for it and figure out how to get the money back from the other owners. Factors are employed by owners to manage the building on their behalf. There are certain obligations that the factor has to comply with in the management of the building, but ultimately it's down to the owners to decide what work is and isn't done, and the factor can obviously facilitate that if they've got agreement and payments to do that. If you don't have a factor and you think, well, I don't really know what we're doing, essentially you have a flat in a self-factored building. Rebecca will post a link to our page on self-factoring so you can see what that's all about. And we would always recommend that you seek professional help from people like architects, building surveyors, structural engineers, damp and mould preservation companies, whatever it may be, when there's something going on, that you have got some kind of professional help on hand to guide you and the other owners on what's required and put together a specification of work. So how can we help you under one roof? We have got hundreds of informative articles on our website about anything to do with tenement management and maintenance. We can talk you through things like putting an owners association together, how to trace owners, how to deal with difficult situations, have difficult conversations, voting processes for work, but we can also guide you through all the technical aspects of repairs. And whatever weird or wonderful or general thing that's going on with your building, chances are we have got an article on it. We've got photographs, we've got architects' drawings, and we can break down the technicalities involved in repairs in layman's terms so that you understand it, and just so that you can kind of join up the dots between what you think might need to happen or what somebody has requested happens within the building to what is actually required. We've also got an inquiry service that's really popular. It's called Ask an Expert. So when you go onto the homepage of the website, you click on the button for Ask an Expert, and it brings you up a page where you plug in all of your information. It comes to myself or Stephen, the other education and training officer, and we'll normally get back to you within a couple of days. We answer around 150 inquiries a month, Scotland-wide, from owners, landlords and professionals who work with local authorities, housing associations, private factors, lawyers, architects, surveyors. We're in touch with a lot of different people. So we're here to help you on anything that's happening in your building and any concerns that you've got. So I'll stop sharing my screen. We'll move back over into the main area so that we can go forward with the Q&A. As I say, you'll get a copy of the slide deck sent to you so you can read through all of this in your own time, and obviously have my email address if you want to contact me directly. Hi Rebecca, have we got questions?
Hi Josephine. Yes, we've got 3 questions in the Q&A box just now. So the very first one is from Jill. She's asking about the timescales in our Webslaw. She says 5 working days to arrange work isn't much. What does that mean? Does it mean a contractor has to have visited, produced an estimate, and this been approved and work to commence in those 5 days?
Jill, it's a really difficult one for me to answer right now because this is only at proposal stage. And at this moment in time, all we know is the proposal is 5 working days for work to be carried out. That we don't know what the government's expectation is going to be behind that when this gains royal assent and becomes an act. So I would work on the basis that within your 10 working days to investigate, that you've gone round and had a look, or your agent's gone round and had a look, you potentially had a contractor come out within that time, so that when you've got your 3 working days to write out to your tenant to let them know what's going to happen, that you've got an idea of what's required, and then that contractor has got 5 working days to complete that work. as I say, right now this is all at proposal stage, and we don't know if this is going to stick or if they could potentially change it. But it's to let you know what's coming and what you are going to have to do. I accept that it's not a huge amount of time. I know, as I said in the presentation, I was a letting agent for the best part of 20 years. I know how difficult it is working with contractors, and I know how even more complicated that's become in a post-Brexit, post-COVID cost of living crisis world that we're living in, and that it can be really, really challenging. So now I guess it's a time to have a Google search, look on things like Trusted Trader, word of mouth, social media, and find out who's working in the area and how you can, how are they there? Can they potentially help you? Who could you call upon when there's issues?
Thanks, Jacqueline. That's very
No
helpful.
probs.
I've got a question from Liz. I'm just wondering what the proposals are. When investigations show that it's not rising or penetrating damp, but damp due to condensation due to tenants not wiping windows, drying clothes inside without sufficient heat or ventilations.
Yeah.
She's also asked in the chat what happens when basically when the landlord has done everything right and it's just the tenants not wanting to heat and ventilate the property
Yeah.
properly. What can you
Yeah.
do?
That's it. Well, I think as I say, we don't have definitive detail from the government. We only have proposal. My interpretation of the proposal would be you've got 10 working days to investigate. If you go out and you're able to identify there's no rise in damp, there's no penetrating damp, this is due to the way that the tenant is living in the property, their lifestyle, the way that they're using it, then you've got your 3 working days to write out to them to explain that to them, remind them of their obligations per the tenancy agreement, and set out in detail what facilities there are in the property for ventilation, that that you've got the windows there to open, this is how you open them, you've got the trickle vents there, you need to keep them open, here's where there's mechanical extraction, this is when you should use this, etc. You've given them all of the instructions to be able to live in the property and heat and ventilate it correctly. Then if they're simply not doing that, and you've exhausted all avenues with them, and follow-up visits to check if they're doing things and they're still simply refusing to do it, and causing damage to the property through their negligence or misuse, then you would need to refer to your tenancy agreement and make a decision as to whether you wanted to continue on with the tenancy or not. And if you didn't, then you would obviously need to serve notice, bring the tenancy to an end, and to move on. If you wanted to continue with it, then you would need to potentially think about, do I need to employ a cleaner or somebody else to be going round here on a regular basis, to to clean off this mold that's developing, to make sure that the windows are opened, etc. I don't know, and decide if are you charging that to the tenant? Are you paying for that yourself, or is that something that you're willing to do? I don't know. But ultimately, if the tenant is negligent and they're misusing the property, then you need to have a serious think about whether you want to continue on with the tenancy or not.
Thank you. We've got another question from Jill just about the specifics of the regulations. You're saying we need to get mold and mildew removed and remove it. Can we not ask a tenant to do that themselves, or do the landlords have to do that?
Jill, as it is as AWAB's law is in England, the onus is upon the landlord to carry out that removal, and not the tenant. If the tenant is a potentially vulnerable individual with a respiratory illness, then they are unlikely to you know, they're unlikely to want to use like a damp and a mold and mildew remover spray to remove that because obviously it could cause them further health issues. And I would work on the basis that as you go around to do your investigations or visits and you find things there, if you can attempt to clean it off yourself and arrange a follow-up visit to see if that's solved the problem or not, then it would be something that you would want to consider doing, or if you're working with a letting agent, ask them what provisions they've got in place for doing that. But certainly if it were me in this situation as a landlord, then that's a kind of proactive action that I would personally be taking until we find out otherwise with when we get more clarification on this piece of legislation, whether we have to do that or not. The indications are that yes, that would have to happen. So I wouldn't entrust that to a tenant. It's not their responsibility. It's your responsibility as a landlord to meet with compliance with the repairing standard and this proposed legislation under the repairing standard. So yeah, you would have to do that, unless we hear otherwise from the government that that's not the case.
Yep. Thank you. There aren't any further questions. I'm having a look in the chat and I'm having a look in the Q&A. Yeah, I can't see any further questions.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I
Excellent.
think that's
okay. All right. I can see that Pamela has posted some information that Dundee have got about dangerous and defective buildings that can result in damp and mold. So that's great. Thank you so much for that. If we don't have any other questions, then I think we'll, we're at 12:56, so we're almost at the top of the hour. I hope that everybody has found that enjoyable. Is there something else that's just popped in, Rebecca?
Yeah, Jacqueline, there's one more. Liz asks, I'm an owner with asthma. Will the government take into account that owners can have health problems and not just tenants?
I've got absolutely no idea, Liz. I can't speak for the Scottish Government. I would like to think so, but I cannot speak to that. Of course, though, there's likely to be some kind of potentially exemptions or circumstances to take into consideration. But where you've got a legal obligation to comply with regulations and the law, if you physically cannot do that as a landlord, then the onus is potentially upon you to employ a professional to do that on your behalf.
Thank you. There's certainly still questions up in the air until we know exactly what all the legislation is going to look like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I hope everybody's found that useful today. Thanks to Graham and Diane for being here and Dundee City Council for allowing us to do this event. We hope that you found it useful and informative, that it's got you thinking. As soon as we get further clarification that comes from the Scottish Government with regards to this legislation, we'll be back in touch with Graham and Diane and we will figure out the best way to circulate that information to you and potentially hold another online event to give you an update. In the meantime, as I say, you'll get a copy of the recording and the slides and the information sent out to you by Rebecca. But thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Lovely. Thanks so much, everyone.